are going to have the presentation, the main substance of our gathering today, to hear from Ugandans on what they think, what their views are on human rights and access to justice. Join me to welcome Mr. Fred Malay from Afrobarometer to come and give us the welcome remarks.
As said, my name is Fred Malay. I'm from HCL Consult and Afrobarometer, and I'm blessed to give these welcoming remarks. Dear members of the panel who are still seated in the audience, representatives of the civil society, representatives from government departments who are here, and agencies, members of the Fourth Estate, the media, the HCL and Afrobarometer family, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and a warm welcome to this important dissemination event for the Afrobarometer Round 10.5 survey on the theme Citizens' Views on Justice and Human Rights. It is a privilege to have such a distinguished gathering of stakeholders committed to promoting, strengthening justice and human rights in our country. As we reflect on the survey findings, we have a unique opportunity to explore key issues that shape the justice landscape in Uganda. How aware are our citizens of their rights? What barriers do they face in accessing justice? What factors influence their confidence or lack of it? These are critical questions that require evidence-based dialogue and collaborative action. The survey results will shed light on the public perceptions, experiences, and expectations regarding justice and human rights. For instance, we may see insights into whether marginalized groups such as women, youth, or those in the rural communities feel adequately served by justice and human rights institutions as they exist in our country. We may also gain a better understanding of what drives people to seek justice through formal or informal mechanisms, and what influences their satisfaction with the outcomes. Today, this discussion is not just about numbers, it is about understanding the realities behind the data. By contextualizing these findings, we can identify practical strategies to improve access to justice, strengthen public trust in institutions, and ensure that human rights are not just theoretical concepts, but lived experiences for all Ugandans. Your presence here today signals a shared commitment to a meaningful engagement and evidence-based decision-making. I encourage each of you to actively contribute to the discussion so that together we can explore pathways to a more just and equitable society. Special thanks go to all of you, our dear guests, and the entire team here and far for the effort you have put in making these numbers meaningful, from the field to analysis and eventual dissemination where we are today. Once again, I want to thank you so much for being here, for braving the rain and giving us the time. I look forward to a fruitful and insightful dialogue. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, now allow me to invite Mr. Francis Chibirige, who is the Managing Director of HCL Consult, the national partner of Afrobarometer to take us through a presentation on human rights and access to justice. May we all put our hands together to welcome him.
Thank you very much, Dr. Serwambara. And thank you, our dear guests today. We are very, very honored to have you attend this research dissemination event. My name is Francis Chibirige. I lead the team, the Afrobarometer team that conducts these surveys in Uganda. We are going to look at what Ugandans think about justice in general, issues of access, issues of demand, supply, and we will also speak briefly about what exactly Ugandans think when they ponder, when they explore the notions of human rights. The Afrobarometer surveys are public opinion, nationally representative sample surveys that are conducted at the household level. These surveys are intended to learn, to explore the voice of public opinion. Public opinion is very important. It may not be the exact account of what is happening within a society, but it is very important for policy planners, researchers, and other actors to know what is the public mood, what do people think, what do they understand, what do they see, what have they learned from their experiences. When you get to know what people think, what people have on their mind, then you can communicate better with them. You can respond better to their requests because you know what they think. So it is from that perspective that we present these results to say this can be useful in many ways in the work that each one of us here do. I will briefly give you an oversight of what you can expect from this report. First, we see that engagement with formal court is increasing, which is very good news. The number and the proportion of Ugandans who choose to go to formal courts is increasing. But accessibility has issues. Issues of high legal costs, lack of awareness, and concerns about judicial independence, corruptions, and the delays in the court pronouncing themselves on certain decisions. Some of those issues that make people feel that it is not easy to access justice. Second, we see that when people think about human rights violations, okay, they think about prolonged court cases as a common occurrence of human rights violation. That it shouldn't take so long. Although it cannot be immediate that you went to court today and today you have a court decision, because court will also take time to determine your case, but it shouldn't also take forever. That some people wait and eventually pass on before their cases are determined. Those may be few, but it is one of those views from the public mood concept that is making people to say, to feel that it is not easy to access justice. Okay, but that's not the only thing they mention. 1/5, that's 20% of ordinary Ugandans, when they think about human rights violation, the first thing that comes to their mind is the curtailing of freedoms of expression, assembly, and association. And that's important because some of these border so much on political rights, okay? And this report today covers a breadth of these rights that include trade rights, violations of the, in the category of gender violence, gender-based violence, child abuse, and others. But in particular, Ugandans, and this is maybe I may back up a little bit here. This survey is nationally representative, as I'm going to show you in the next 2 slides. So these views are not Kampala kind of sentiments or urban sentiments. These are views that bring together a representative sample of adult Ugandans from each and every corner of this country. This is what they think. And maybe let me point something else that you can use in the rest of this presentation. When we say 1/5, we said you take 100, you divide it 5 times, you get 20%. So 20% of the people we spoke to think like that. Now, since this sample is representing all adult Ugandans, call them 20 million adult Ugandans for convenience's sake. 20% or 5 times, if you divide the 20 million 5 times, what do we get? We get 4 million. So this is a view shared by 20 million Ugandans. We can confidently say with a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points that 24 million Ugandans, 4 million adult Ugandans think like this. So why does that matter? It matters because that's a big number. That's very many of adult Ugandans. As part of the issues that make people think that access to justice in Uganda is still constrained, we see that many see the justice system as favoring the wealthy and the powerful. Okay? Now, that is not good. If this is to improve, there has to be equity. And those many voices of ordinary Ugandans cry for a situation where they feel that if they walked into a justice institutions to seek justice, they should get fair treatment regardless of their social status. What the Afrobarometer is. We are a Pan-African, non-partisan survey research network that provides reliable survey data, public opinion data as I mentioned, across now 42 African countries. And we've done this kind of research work together with our partners for the last 25 years. The Afrobarometer is headquartered in Accra, Ghana. We have core partner institutions that supervise the research that we do in each sub-region of the continent. For us in Africa, the major focus of the Afrobarometer surveys is democracy, quality of democracy and governance. Our colleagues in Europe, they focus mostly on happiness. Which cities are more livable, for instance? Our goal as a network here is to give every adult African an equal and known voice in the policy-making process. Now, Afrobarometer surveys are peer-reviewed and conform to all the laws that govern scientific research in Uganda. Now, all our data, all our reports, even in its raw form, is freely available online. All you need, there will be a link at the end of this presentation. We will give you a copy of this presentation, don't worry. If we would want to generate some of these results like I will be showing you today, you can do so on our website without the need to have statistical software. Now, this is where we work. These different color gradations show you the different countries where the Afrobarometer has so far worked and for how many rounds of surveys. But those are our newest members. The gray parts of the continent, with the exception of Chad here, but obviously Somalia here and Mauritania there, are places we hope to survey in the near future. I talked about our methodology briefly. These are nationally representative sample surveys. Nationally representative means that the results you generate can be extrapolated to the rest of the country. It's a simple science that has been used for so many, should I say, millennia. And that for you to understand, for instance, to understand what all Ugandans think given an issue, you don't have to necessarily go and speak to all of them. You can take a representative sample. In the similar analogy, like if your doctor needs to know what is it that is bothering you, giving you that fever, they will take a small droplet of your blood. They will draw a little bit of your blood from the capillary ends in your fingers and test that to tell you what is in the rest of your bloodstream. So it's the same analogy that we use. Our surveys are face-to-face, one-on-one, and in the language of the respondent's choice. So meaning we don't speak to people over the fence, across closed doors, but we look them in the eye. We are welcomed in their homes, and we have a conversation in their language. So we recruit a team that speak the language of each area that has fallen in our sample. Usually our teams range between 80 to 110, 120 people that we train for about 2 weeks before they go to the field. And also the questions are all translated into those respective local languages. Not only here, but across the entire continent. So we conducted this survey between the 16th of January this year and the 2nd of February this year. I know we are going to be talking about justice, human rights, and the like. So there would be a temptation to interpret these results in the context of the most recent happenings. Please remember, this was done, the field work was conducted in January this year, majorly. So issues of Kawempe are not after the fact that we were in the field. So we spoke to 2,400 adult Ugandans, and that size of the sample, if drawn randomly, in comparison with the national population, will give you a margin of error of +2 minus percentage points. Okay, so this is how our sample is broken across the different demographics. You can compare this with the recent population census, and you see that it should match or closely match with the census. And that's one of the reasons that makes a survey nationally representative. So, as I said, the Afrobarometer surveys are big. We only extracted this component for purposes of this discussion. But of the many other issues that we track and we study in this survey, issues about democracy and governance, as I mentioned, trust in national and state institutions, issues of accountability and perceived official corruption, issues of poverty and livelihoods and economic well-being, identity, participation and contacting, issues about elections, security and public safety. We study in this survey, we include, all of these are different modules in the survey. So it's a group of questions that interrogate that issue. And today we will be talking about justice and rights. On this map, every little dot you see there, are those little small dots, is a village that we visited for this particular survey. So we have GPS pinpointed that village, not the people that we spoke to. IRBs won't allow that. So, and the color coding on the graph here indicates population densities. So what you will see quickly is that places that are dark in color have more dots than places that are lighter in color because there are fewer people there. So our samples are sensitive to population distributions, obviously, because we speak to people. We don't speak to the geography, but to the people. You will also see many color codings of the charts. Please, the color codings we use are not political. So don't see a red, a green here, a blue there, and you color code it politically. If Afrobarometer were to pay attention to the different politicized color codings across the continent, we would run out of the color palette. So please bear with us. We only chose those colors for purposes of making it, let me say, beautiful and easier to see rather than anything. Okay, so finally, we can start to look at what is it that this survey found. And I would like to begin with issues about the extent that people are aware, know, or prefer with regards to justice, and also some actions that they prefer to take in relation to their attempts to access justice. Some of these we will aggregate into our measures of access and demand or supply of justice. Compared to the year 2015, the proportion of Ugandans who have been directly involved in an administrative, civil, or criminal case that came before a government court or a tribunal has increased. That's good, that many of us decide, afford, or find it convenient or important, or whatever the reason is, to go to a formal court. And that to grow is very important. However, so has the reported difficulty of accessing services, these judicial services, that the people who say it is difficult to obtain justice is also growing. Okay, so we've also looked at the likelihood of going to court. Say if one was involved in a dispute that requires to go to court, to what extent do they feel that they can afford to go to court? Afford money-wise, but also afford in terms of time and what should I say? And all that comes with. Do they know where court is? Do they understand how court does, or do they understand court processes? So when you put all that together, we've found that 2/3 say they could probably afford to take a dispute to court. Okay? So these are not people who are currently involved in a dispute, but these are people who feel they are encouraged. 2/3 is a good number to start with. It's about 67% who say if they were faced with a dispute, they can afford, they can decide to take it to court. Okay? Now, nearly 60% think that it is likely they would get a fair court resolution. Again, these are health numbers when we are thinking about our context. Okay? And also, 4 in 10, that's about 40%, would expect their case to be resolved within a reasonable amount of time. Okay? Now, we will see in detail what those mean. Okay. All right. Access to legal services. Now, this is what you would need to prepare to go to court, for instance, if we were to go. Now, about 6 in 10 say that it is likely they could find or afford legal advice if they needed it. Now, I'm obviously showing you proportions who are reporting positive. But as I do so, please think about the 40%, in this case 60%, okay? So 6 in 10 say it is likely they could find or afford legal advice. So there is a 40% who say they cannot. Now 40% is nearly half of everyone who say they cannot afford. And we will quickly see who is that 40%. And we will understand that those are also the most disadvantaged. And those are also the ones who say they have suffered the most. Okay. Lastly, there are reasons why people would choose not to take that dispute to court. Okay? But high costs are the most common reason that people would not take a dispute to court. And that cost is built up. I will be showing you what exactly makes up that high cost. One way we could quickly think about here is, can court processes in their breadth be made more affordable? Okay, as a way of encouraging more of us to go to court. Let me show you some results. So this is compared to the year 2015. This is the proportion of people who say they have ever been involved in any dispute as claimants, as witnesses that ended up in a court. Okay, so the correct description is they have ever been involved in an administrative, civil, or criminal case before a government court. And they were, so in our charts, if you look at this text below the chart, that's exactly how the question was put to the respondents. So we asked in the last 5 years from the date of that survey. So if it is January 2025, we count 5 years ago, okay? And we say that it would be January 2020. They say, how often, if ever, have you or anyone in your family been directly involved in an administrative, civil, or criminal case that has come before a government court or tribunal as a claimant, as a respondent, or defendant, or as a witness. So in any of those categories, the reason we say so is because then that person has a personal experience of having been to court. So we have responses from people who say, this is what I have heard about court, that court is expensive, that court is difficult, that in a court they ask for this, that. But we also have people who say, I have personally been involved as one of these categories. So that's the 16% I'm talking about. It used to be 12% 10 years ago. It is grown by 6 percentage points. So whatever our duty bearers in the justice sector have done has helped grow that number by 6%. Congrats. And we hope that can be doubled in the next 10 years. Now, if we want to drill deeper in that 16% for this year, who are they? These are people, 10% say they have gone to court once. The number of times those disputes that you have been involved in was once. 4% say it was twice. And 3 or more times was also 4%. Remember, those are compared to 2015. These who have been there more frequent have all doubled. Okay? So that's why we say that there has been an increase in the proportion of those who have been before a formal court. Now, formal court is, do I need to explain that? So it excludes the local courts, the informal courts, includes LOCs and below. Okay, formal court, you have gone before a magistrate or a judge. Okay, who would be contacted first to resolve a legal problem? Again, this is the question we asked. If you had a legal problem, like a serious complaint against a business or a member of your community, where would you be most likely to go to try to find a resolution? What we find is that people go local. They go nearest to where they live, where they work. Okay? And that could be, maybe that's where they feel more confident. That's where they can afford. The transport is not that high, or the people there, they can relate. There are reasons. But what we see, the majority here, they will say they will go to police. They will go, this other includes local councils. Okay? And they will go to political leaders. They will go to a traditional leader or a traditional court. This local court is the formal court we are talking about. So we are calling it local here, that it is within the locality there, a magistrate's court, for instance. Okay? Government officials, family members, legal aid service providers, and you can see the numbers dwindling. So, in other words, if we are to improve on what we, from this slide, are calling first responders, we need to pay attention to where people go and why they go there. For instance, we may think 90% who say they go to a traditional leader or traditional court is small. No, that's nearly 10%. If we were 20 million, 10% of 20 million is 2 million. So that's still a big number, you know. When you look at these percentages, you can think of them as percentages of the adult population. Okay. Likelihood of taking a dispute to court, like I mentioned before. Again, these are the questions down. There are 3 questions we asked. All of this is for 2025, okay? And what do we see? When we ask the people, if you had a case that needed to go to court, how likely do you think it is that you could afford to take the case to court? Now, this afford here is not only monetary. So in our translation, we also included a decision to go to court if you have the money or the time or the understanding of what you are going to do there. Okay? So that's the proportion we say. Those who decide that they can take the case to court are now 66%. That they could get a fair resolution in court. 55% think they can get a fair resolution in court. and that case could be resolved in a reasonable amount of time, that's the 42%. But remember, a half say it won't be resolved in a reasonable amount of time. And that's one reason they would say, I would not go there. And there is a third who say, no, I would not afford to take it to court. It may be too expensive, it may be too long, it could take too long, or I don't understand how to do it. Okay. All right. The likelihood of finding, here are the questions. If you had a legal problem, like a serious complaint against a business or a member of your community, how likely do you think that you could find the advice or support you need from lawyers or legal services to address or resolve the problem? That's nearly 60% who say it is somewhat or very likely they could find that help. Okay, here. So there is a 40% who can't. So as we think about these numbers as being appreciably high, let's also pay attention to the ones below who say they can't. You could afford to obtain the legal advice or support that you need. Now, this afford is monetary in this case. So are you able to pay? So nearly 60% say they would pay, all right? But as we will see later, it is not a cost they will pay that easily, okay? All right. So this is when we talk about the ease of accessing assistance from courts. How easy or difficult was it to obtain the assistance you needed from courts? This is to the people who went there. Now, the people who say that it was easy or very easy has remained the same over the last 10 years. You see, it is that 5%. But the proportion who say it was difficult or very difficult has doubled from 6% in the year 2015 to 13% this year. Now, there is obviously challenges bundled there. As I said, many are accessing, but also the proportion who say it is difficult is growing. In this case, in the last 10 years, the proportion who say it has been difficult to access assistance from courts has doubled. So are the courts ready, equipped? Do they have enough resources to address, to attend to all these requests in shorter time? Okay. This is when we talked about the most important reason that disputes are not taken to a formal court. I will quickly scan through a few, but the first three, you can see they are all about costs. So 20%, 45% say the costs are too high. Court costs are too high. Then lawyers are too expensive. That's another 26%. Of course, here they would give more than one answer. So that's why you see when you add all these up, it won't be 100, it'll be more than 100. Okay, so then there is this view that judges, prosecutors, court officials will demand for money, another 24%. That's nearly a quarter within margin of error, who say they will ask me for money that maybe I don't have. Then there are those who don't expect fair treatment from the word go. They say, I will not bother. Then those 10% who expect that it will take long. So in other words, this is some of those reasons that people give, and they are weighted differently. So the question is, how do we make access to justice less cumbersome, less costly, taking less time, so that ordinary Ugandans, and we will see who are the people who are most affected by this phenomenon of court costs or costs related to taking a case to court being too high in their perspective. Let's also remember that what may be high as a cost to an individual may not be high for another. But we are taking this relative that when these respondents say court costs are too high, we didn't say how high or what is high. So that's their opinion. Whether 10,000 registration fees, this I'm making up, I'm not saying it is 10,000. So whether 10,000 is too high for an individual, or it's 100,000 that is too high for an individual, 1 million that is too high for an individual, that's their decision to make. All we need to know is from their perspective, was it affordable or not affordable. Okay. So generally, it would be interesting to make this less cumbersome. When we compare over the last 10 years, from 2015 to 2025, and we aggregate these reasons, okay? So when you look at these reasons, you can categorize them. You can say these reasons are relating to costs. These reasons are relating to people understanding their rights under the law. These reasons are relating to people's views about court infrastructure. Do we have enough courts? Do we have enough judicial officers? And then when you do that, you realize that this one category of high legal costs that brings together court fees, lawyer fees, and the like, has almost doubled. Yes, so that's from 40 to 71%. Okay, from 49, that's an increase of about 20 percentage points in the last 10 years. So are court costs and related fees becoming higher in reality, or people feel the pinch that when they have to pay these, they feel it is that high. Okay? And then there are people who say they have issues with court. For instance, they think court is not independent, or they think court is not competent, or they think there is corruption in the court system. That has marginally dropped from 62 to 49%. Okay? Then there are those who say they don't know. They don't know their rights. They don't know court processes. They don't know how court operate. Okay? That has also marginally dropped from 43 to 30% over the last 10 years. Then there are those who mention technicalities that they cannot navigate. Legal language used in court, that there are complex processes within court. You know, they can tell you to come back tomorrow with a reason you, an ordinary person, may not understand. Then there are also issues about court infrastructure, such as distance to the courts, lack of legal aid services close by, and the fact that when you need to go to court, then you are in trouble. So maybe those who want to help you want also to exploit your situation. And then there are those who fear intimidation and retaliation from those they are accusing. Say, this person is far way stronger than me outside court. I may drag them there, but what do I do when I come back to my house? And the like. Okay, now, there is also this table. This we will do on the rest of those results and provide this in the full paper. But we've tried to create a comparison, okay, between everybody we spoke to nationally. If you look at this column where we say all respondents, and we are comparing between those who have never been to court, what do they think about these reasons, and those who have ever been to court. You will notice a very interesting pattern here. So when you think about the most important reason disputes are not taken to court, and you are comparing between people who have ever been to court and those who have never been to court in the last 5 years, there are differences, but there are also similarities in some issues. First of all, for those who say court costs are too high, 45% of everybody in Uganda says so from our sample, but more so among those who have never been to court, 47%, and those who have been there a little lower, 40% say. Okay? You begin to get the idea. Then when we say lawyers are too expensive, 26%, a quarter, and that seems to be maintained, but it is high amongst those who have actually faced the lawyers to say, okay, their fees are too high. Judges, prosecutors, and court officials demand for money. That's dead on. So 24% nationally, 24% amongst those who have never been to court, and 23% amongst those who have been to court. Those three figures are the same within the margin of error. Okay? Then you can make the comparison across all the others and then realize that, okay, there may be differences here and there between those who have and have not been to court, but these perceptions are shared. Okay, so quickly, I will switch gears and speak about what people in our sample think about human rights violations. Okay, and this is in summary. So we asked people, what comes to your mind when you hear the phrase human rights violation? Okay, this was in January. And this is what most Ugandans think of curtailed freedoms, violence, including gender-based violence, injustice, and tend to report to the nearest leadership centers when faced with such violations. Okay? That's a major takeaway, that the curtailing of freedoms comes to the fore when people think about human rights violations. And to know that this is across the entire country, it's not amongst urbanites, it's not amongst the educated. We will see the differences, the demographic differences. But this is across everyone, okay? That's very telling. Two, how often do they see these human rights violations in their own community? We didn't want to ask people about what they have heard or what they have seen on the media or heard in the media. But what is it they have witnessed in their communities? Because sometimes when you hear a story, if it is changed several times, several hands, it may get to you colored differently. But how about that which you witnessed yourself in your own community? So a significant number of Ugandans see human rights violations as a common occurrence. They say it is common for women to be abused, for children to be abused. It's common for these sort of kinds of violations to occur in our community. 1/2 see prolonged court cases as a human rights violation, as I mentioned earlier. And about 1/3 see gender-based violence and child abuse. And 1/5 see disappearances or arbitrary arrests as frequent. Again, these are national results. This is not from one corner of the country. Young and educated Ugandans, when we talk about demographic differences, we say, who are the people who most see these sort of violations? So it is the young and educated Ugandans, those living in urban areas, and those living in the eastern and the central part of the country are more likely. So in statistical terms, we say, if you were to look for such people and offer them help, and say, hey, please, let's talk about these and let's resolve them, where would you go first and foremost? So you would go to those kind of demographics. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that it is absent from everywhere else. And this is what we mean. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase? This is what Ugandans said. Curtailing of freedoms was at 20%, gender-based violence 15%, arbitrary arrests and detentions 10%, brutality of security forces, 7%. Child abuse and neglect, 7%. Denial of public trial, fair public trial, 6%. Disappearances or arbitrary killings, 4%. All the way down to the 9% who said nothing in particular. Okay? Now, this tells us two things. One, that people know what violations are. Okay? And two, they say they see them, they hear them in their communities. And I think it is incumbent on all of us to find ways that these could become less common, less occurring. And these are the typical ones that we pulled out to test. We asked respondents, these are the individual questions we asked, and these are the results. The dark color represents the people who say these violations occur often or always in their community. And the ones in the lighter blue, the darker blue, the proportion who say these violations never or rarely occur. Okay, so we begin by, I think we start from the most frequent at 49%, are the prolonged court cases I talked about. Okay, so near half of everyone we talked to say that these prolonged court processes are a human rights violation. And 38% say child abuse or neglect happens in their community often or always. So they will see children who are neglected or abused. Gender-based violence. This is violence against a person because of their gender. I think it is gender specific. And that's a third of us, Ugandans, who say so. Denial of a fair public trial, 28%, who say that happens often. RF or forced marriages, this is amongst young adults, at 31%. 28% are those who say curtailing of freedoms of expression and assembly, 28%, that these happen commonly in their communities. Brutal force by security, that's nearly 1/3. Again, this is across Uganda. It's not only in one corner of the country. We will see when we disaggregate these by sub-regions. Then curtailing freedom of the media, that's 24%. Now, what I usually tell my colleagues, that there is some media freedom specific analysis we've done using Afrobarometer data. And what we conclude from across the entire continent is that our brothers and sisters in the media, you've done very well to entertain us, one, and two, to inform us. But you've not told us, we ordinary Ugandans, what is it you need to do your work? So the day your rights are curtailed, we don't know what to do. We are like, oh, they switched off this one, we will listen to the other one. Because we cannot come out and say, defend the media rights, because we don't know it. You've not told us that for you to go and do your work, you need certain freedoms protected. So people don't know. And when you come out and say, oh, media this, media, they say, what are you talking about? Which other radio is on? Which other TV or radio is playing music? We will join that. Okay. So it is important, it will be important for our brothers in the fourth estate to also include aspects when you are doing your DJ work, when you're doing your programming, to tell us a little bit, as your listeners, what is it you need for you to do what you do? That way, the day you are crying out for your rights, we may offer you an additional voice to say, let them work. Otherwise, we don't know. So 24% say it's a problem, it's a human rights violation when your rights are freedom, when your media freedom rights are curtailed. Arbitrary arrests and detentions at a quarter. Now, a quarter of an adult population, again, if we go back to the 20 million analogy, you divide that, quarter is 4 ways, that's 5 million. I think you can win a presidential election in Uganda with 5 million votes, roundabout. So it's not a small number. So to know that a quarter of all adult Ugandans say that arbitrary arrests and detentions are common, that's a bad thing. I'm not saying this is good either, because this is a half of the 10, that will be, of the 20 million, this will be 10 million people. But I'm saying as the gravity increases of the human rights violations, these numbers should be reducing further. And I think it is incumbent on all of us Ugandans to find ways of how these purported human rights violations can be lessened, or at least the view, the perception among the people that they are common should be lessened by them not happening, by those violations not happening more. Now, there is something we've done to help to understand, to contextualize all this reportage. If you took all these 10 reported human rights violations and you compressed them together and said, what is the view that comes out of them? What do you see? This is what you see. You will see that the proportion who say, taken together, those violations never happen, will be 5%. And the proportion who say, those violations always happen, I mean, taken together, if you aggregated all of them, would be 7%. And that aggregation is explained here. So what do? So the responses on all those 10 measures of human rights violations were combined into an average score for each respondent. And then respondent scores were aggregated into an index summarizing the sample's views. This is everybody in the sample. On whether all of these human rights violations taken together occur never, rarely, often, or always in their community. In summary, we see that our distribution of people who report occurrence on these human rights violations is clustered in the middle, like we would expect, with very few saying it never happens, and similarly, a fewer number saying it happens always, and the majority there in the middle. So what we've done is to say, if you put these two together, those who say it often happens in their community, 36%, and the 7% who say it always happens in their community. What demographic breakdown can we learn from that? Who are those people who say so? This is what we see. The total will be 43 when we add them together. And that's where we say that there is no differences between gender. So men and women don't see human rights violations differently, when we are speaking in general terms. But those who have a little bit more education than others, who have attained more education than others, and those who are younger, okay? So you see that the bars are longer for those in the lower age categories, 18 to 30, 40 to 31. Also note that this group is the biggest. So 18 to 30-year-olds are more than everybody else. But also, like I reported earlier, those in urban areas, that these violations, you will tend to find them more in the urban areas than in the rural. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen in the rural, okay? But it will be mostly in the urban areas. Now, when you come to regional differences, you will see these violations mostly in the eastern part of the country, in the central, and here in Kampala, all right? And then, as we said, remember I said I will show you who are the most affected. Here, the people who say the high lived poverty category, okay? These, in our measure of lived poverty index, we categorize people based on their relative deprivations of 5 key essentials you would need at home, such as food, water, fire for cooking, and medical care. So when you aggregate people, you can say these people often or always go without enough. So we can say they experience more of this deprivation. And we say they experience high lived poverty. So those are the people who also tend to report these violations the most. Okay? Now, I also gave you that analogy when we are looking at similar results about perceptions of official corruption and said, if a poor person lost their only 5,000 to corruption, they will report it with gravity. But if somebody who has some disposable income parted with 50 or 100,000, they say, yeah, that person helped me get out of a fix. But if the person gave away the only thing they had, they will report it even with more gravity. And we see the same here, that the people who experience deprivations more also tend to report these violations the highest. Now, interestingly, our brothers from the Muslim faith also tend to out-report this more than the others. Where Ugandans report first and foremost, so we saw this, so they will report at the LOC 1 or 2 level. That's almost 6 in 10 people. They will tell the LOC first and foremost that they have a problem. They will go to the local police or local station. They will go to the Uganda Human Rights Regional Office, 3%. They will go to the police. So this is when they are faced with these violations. But also, we should remember that the gravity or nature of the violation also determines where you go first and foremost. Okay, so this is in general. Okay, I'm looking at the last section. So this is the last section we are going to talk about briefly. We are going to look at views, what people think about impartiality of the justice system. Okay. All right, so there is this notion of evading court, okay? Avoiding to go to court if one had to. So 9 out of 10 Ugandans, that's a big 92%, say that it is likely that a rich person could pay a bribe or use personal connections to avoid going to court. And that, similarly, this is 2/3, 67% say the same about an ordinary person. So the fact that people can use bribery or personal connections to avoid court is also a hindrance to accessing justice. Then the administration of justice, this is what people say. The majority of citizens think that court decisions are at least sometimes influenced by the powerful and favor certain groups over others. So some of these sentiments, again, make people feel that they will not even attempt to go to court. And I think it is incumbent, again, on all of us to find ways to dispel these fears or address them. So what do we mean? Likelihood of going to court. This is what we asked people in this country. How likely do you think it is that an ordinary person could pay a bribe or use personal connections to avoid or to get away with going to court? That's 33% who said not likely or not at all likely, but the 67% said that's likely. But for what we call the rich person, the public view is that no, that person will likely not go to court. Does it mean rich people don't go to court? They do, okay? But the view out there amongst ordinary Ugandans is that if they want, they may avoid going to court, okay? Or they would go, you would see them have gone there, but they have actually not, okay? Okay, now we asked about these 6 measures about impartiality and integrity in the judicial system. So we asked, in general, how often do you think that judges, magistrates, and court officials in this country do each of the following things? Okay? And one was, say, favor some ethnic groups over others, favor ruling party supporters over the opposition supporters, decide cases based on personal biases, favor people of some religion over others, or decide cases based on political influence, or favor men over women in their decisions. Okay? Now, this dark color is the proportion of who say that these measures or biases occur often or always. That's their view. So nearly half think that the judicial officers will favor men over women in their decisions. And we men, now speaking like a man, have held this view that if you both, a man and a woman, went to court or police crying, they would help the lady before they help you, the man. But this seems to be countering that. I don't know if it is a recent change, but 47% say that court officials will favor men over women. Gender biasness. A similar percentage, 48%, think that court officials will decide cases based on political influence. 41 say they would favor some religion over others. We saw nearly 20% who say they would favor some ethnic groups over others. Remember, we are leaving out the middle group who say sometimes this may happen. Okay? Now, again, these sentiments are not healthy for a vibrant, functioning judicial system, and we would need to find ways as a country to address them. We've done comparative analysis of these sentiments across countries, and we see countries where access to justice is held in far higher regard without many of these biases, or at least they are very low. Places like Botswana, Mauritius, and you think it would be great to be a police officer there or to be a judge in those countries because people from the word go expect you not to be biased. Okay? And one of the things we ask in the Afrobarometer is, what is it we can do in our individual countries to lessen these perceptions? Okay. Now, when you add these together, you aggregate them and say, the people who see or perceive these biases, when you put it together, how are they distributed? So 12% say those biases, those 6 biases, occur often or always, and 18% say those never occur. So this time we've put together the ones who have faith that these biases never or rarely occur in our justice system, and see who are those who see things positive. Okay, so we don't want to be negative all the time. Sometimes we go negative to tell our duty bearers that this is what people think about you, what can you do? In this case, we want to show them where are the people who think they are not biased, that they exercise their judicial service with impartiality. That's 52%. So it's more women who do this appreciation. It's more of the people without formal education or the less educated, maybe because they are not critical, because they don't know enough about what they should be doing. Okay, so you see the longer bars amongst the groups that have attained lower levels of education. But there are no age differences. Okay, so across age, people say no. It's the same. It's more in the rural areas. You would say maybe they are not countering this at the same level. It's more in the north and in the western part of the country, but at least in the central, Kampala, or eastern parts of the country. It's amongst the ones who we said earlier have experienced moderate or high levels of lived poverty. And it's amongst the people who support the ruling party, or those who are not affiliated to any party, but obviously lowest amongst opposition party supporters. So there is a political spin on this as well, and also strongest amongst the Christians compared to the Muslims. So these are people who say these manner of biases never or rarely occur. But as I said, okay, so that's the group here. So like I said, when you are thinking about these who say they are rarely occurring, you think about the opposite. Those who say they are often always occurring, like in this group here, in the central, like among those who are more educated, like amongst the men and the like. So that's how you would read them. I have three more slides left. Please bear with me. Okay, so we talk about impunity and unequal treatment. Again, this is a subject that comes up quite often. We had 3 measures in the survey. So we asked, in your opinion, how often in this country are people treated unequally under the law? So where they would be treated equally, how often are they treated unequally? How often do officials who commit crimes go unpunished? Or how often do ordinary people who break the law go unpunished? You can see that the trend, this is from the year 2015, all these surveys we've conducted in those years, nationally representative, the proportion of people who say that people are often or always treated under the law goes hand in hand with that who say officials who commit crimes often always go unpunished. But those who say ordinary people who commit crimes often always go unpunished is much lower than the other two. Again, this would be self-reporting in some respects, that people don't want to be critical of themselves, they want to blame others. But nonetheless, that on ordinary people who commit crimes often go unpunished is growing. And in fact, has nearly doubled in the last 10 years. From 16%, it would have doubled to 32%, was once 34% last year. Okay? So it is not rosy that people feel this unequal treatment under the law or discrete is growing. Now, when we put those together, those 3 measures together again, we see the proportion who say it never happens, 16%, and 5% who say it happens always. And then when we put these together, those who say they see equal treatment under the law, okay, that never or rarely happens, this is where they are. Like I said, it's more in the north, western, and eastern parts of the country. It's amongst the Christians, those supporters of the ruling party, people in the rural areas, but there are no age differences. And then less among those who have attained higher levels of education, but strongest amongst those with lower levels of education, no gender differences. Okay, then we can see what that means. Okay, last 2 slides. You could ask yourself that what is driving all these views? What are those factors? So we had a section that looked deeper into what is it that is driving these views and perceptions and reported experiences. It will be in the larger paper. But this is what we can pick out as a snapshot. When you look at the proportion, to some people, you cannot access court before you go through police. So when we look in our data at the proportions who say they trust police and those who trust court, those lines move together. when you look at the proportions who say there is corruption in the police and the proportion who say there is corruption in the court system, those lines go together because to some people, those things are the same. They see them on the same day, right? When they need to go to court, they will, maybe they are dragged by the police there. Okay, so the proportion who say most or all of the police officials are corrupt, okay, this, Madam SSP Dorothy, this is not to say in verbatim. This is a perception amongst the people. So the people who say most or all of the police officials are corrupt, that proportion has remained the same over the last, this is from the year 2002 to the year 2024. That's over 20 years. So that was 67 in 2022, 2002 rather, and 68 today. What do we learn from there? That police has done a lot. I was surprised. The last time we had an engagement with police at police headquarters, we learned that police is doing a lot to address, for instance, issues of corruption within the police and has a lot of programs and the opportunities to engage with us ordinary people to make sure that these issues are addressed within police. Maybe we don't know enough about them, but the perception amongst us persists that there is corruption within police. So what we learn from that line alone is to say whatever is being done needs to be done more, brought to the people, engaged with the people so that we understand what is being done. Secondly, we see the people who say they trust the police somewhat or a lot is a zigzag line. Okay? Sometimes it is rising, sometimes it's falling. And you can plot different dates or times along that trajectory. I don't want to do that now. But what we see is that it also has more or less remained the same from 43% 20 years ago to 47% today. Okay? And it is lower than the proportion who say they think there is corruption in the police. So one way we can improve on trust within the police is to address issues of perceived corruption in the police. Because a lot is being done by the police. You know, it was surprising when we were thinking through what these data mean. And we said, look, someone can say police is corrupt, but the day they lost their phone, they will be the first one to run to the nearest police station to say, I have lost my phone. So all of a sudden, when they have a need, police is important, is there, should. But when they are talking, they say, no, there is corruption there. You understand? So we need to look into those. And finally, we say perceived corruption and trust in the court. Notice the trajectory, similar, that the people who say most or all judges and magistrates or court officials are corrupt, okay, that line used to be lower. It is growing, unlike for the police that has stayed the same. You know, police has this, amongst all the state institutions, they are the most in contact with the people, especially ordinary people. You don't need to walk too far away to find a police station there or a police post. There should be one within your sub-county. And if you are in a city like Kampala, maybe around the corner. So people's experience with court are far more frequent than their experiences with court. Experiences with the police are far more frequent than their experiences with court or other institutions of police. So when they say there is corruption, there it is because they are the ones they see the most or interact with the most. But what is surprising here for the court, the proportion who say that there is corruption within the court is overtaking the proportion who say that they trust court. Because before it used to be the reverse. That at least for them, they enjoyed these higher levels of trust, even though there was perceptions of corruption. But the perceptions of corruption have now, as of now, in these last two surveys, overtaken the proportion who say they trust the courts. And that's not healthy. So whatever is being done within a court, because a lot also has been undertaken within a court to address these perceptions of corruption and improve people's trust in the court system, seems not to be working. It needs to be double efforts, more strategized, and going closer to the people. I would thank you very much for listening, and I would hand back to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Francis, for this very wonderful report. I want to believe that all of us, as he took us through this report, it was speaking, very, very much speaking, like somebody describing your bed, the bed from which you jumped this morning. That's what this report was doing. There are so many things that, the report talked about, and I feel like all of us have lived experiences with this. Allow me to invite the panel that is going to help us sort of discuss, shed more light, and bring some of these experiences close to us, close to home, and we see what that means. Allow me invite Miss Hope Bagota from the Human Rights Commission. You are most welcome, madam. Please have your seat. On the same note, allow me invite somebody that many of you must be, you've cocked your guns. You could have cocked your guns, whatever the gun may be, in asking questions at a later time. But the report has profoundly spoken about this. This person comes from the Directorate of Human Rights and Legal Services in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, specifically the Uganda Police, and that is the Senior Superintendent of Police, Miss Dorothy Chobutungi. I saw the last bit of the report talking about the police, and I was like, yes. By the way, the yes is on behalf of Ugandans. It's not mine. Okay. Let us also welcome somebody who has a very long journey from the media, from, those of you remember SEDU. You remember SEDU? SEDU, Citizens Coalition on Electoral Democracy in Uganda. And this time, this person is the Executive Director of Electoral Laws Institute in Uganda. That is Miss Charity Kalebo Aimbisibwe. Ladies and gentlemen, let us also put our hands together and welcome the Executive Director of Women's Democracy Network, Miss Perry Aritua. I hope you are going to peruse through the report, and that report should speak to the gender aspects. Online, we have somebody who a number of journalists here know. This is a person who I have also worked with as a journalist during my prime time. He is the Executive Director of Human Rights Network for Journalists, HRNJ, and that is Mr. Robert Sempala. I hope he's there. Yes. Robert, you are welcome. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Great. I want to begin with in some space they say, ladies first when men are not hungry. Robert, we would like to hear from you, first of all, your general views on how do the findings in this report align with what you have observed in your work on justice and human rights. And I just want to pick this in a minute or so from all the panelists. The findings that have been presented to us, how do they speak? How how do they resonate with your work around human rights and justice? Robert?
Thank you very much. I couldn't be in Kampala. I'm away in West Nile, in Arua, to be specific. The report is exhaustive by far, and I want to thank the Afrobarometer team. It speaks to the real issues that touch a lot of our democracy and human rights. Specifically, thrilled by the area about what people think of human rights, that it is a violation to freedom of speech, assembly, and association. That perception really speaks a lot, and I'm sure that it is one of the areas we really must preoccupy ourselves with discussing to make sure that the perception changes through the acts that can indicate realization that we need to do more in order to perfect this trajectory of human rights. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Charity, how do these findings align with what you have observed in your work?
Okay, thank you very much, Afrobarometer, for this research and for the data. I found it quite interesting that Ugandans speak their minds. And quite often, we sometimes are drawn to think they probably are not paying attention. But from the data, and because it is a national representation, it shows that Ugandans are paying attention. If you look at the highest number of violations, the issues are disappearance, arbitrary killings. And we continue to see disappearance and arbitrary killings. In my work, I see that a lot. Aaron Kiza is still being locked up. He's a lawyer, human rights defender. And I keep asking myself on a daily basis, why is Aaron behind bars? Because one, he was not supposed to be tried by a military court, and it is the military court that sent him to Kitalia. He's still there. Then we have seen the question of denial of fair public trial. Kizza Besigye has not yet taken his fair public trial. And Ugandans are saying, we see this happening. How did they know who goes to influence their perceptions? And then they have also talked about the high-handed nature of security. And I like the disclaimer that came from Francis, that look, my data was collected before Kawempe, but Kawempe was not any different from what the data is saying. The data is telling us that the security continues to be high-handed, and that there is even corruption when you go to police. And that one has remained the same for 10 years. I don't know how many experiences I can give how I've been to police when my laptop was stolen and up to date, it has never been recovered. I could even tell you that one time I was on a panel with Muleterwa. He's an assistant commissioner for community policing. I gave him my issue. He told me, give me your record of when you reported to the police. This is going to be sorted today. I gave it to him. He said, let's go to Kawempe. He held my hand. We walked to Kawempe. That is the end of the story. Up to now, 7 years later, no justice. Is it true that police is corrupt? Absolute. What happened there is a story for another day, but the data has spoken to that experience. And so I will say for a fact that I am very grateful that Afrobarometer put out this data. As I thought about this data, I thought about 2-3 things. The data is telling me interesting things about the judiciary. One, that people have confidence in the judiciary, but at the same time, they find it costly to go to court. And it is true that going to court is not easy. And today I want to do advocacy for only one key thing. SEDA is the Center for Arbitration and Alternative Dispute Resolution. SEDA was dissolved. court for a long time had wanted to initiate alternative dispute resolution as a mechanism to allow Ugandans access justice faster, cheaply, and quicker. Now, the Minister for Constitutional Justice, who is Honorable Norbert Mao, is supposed to constitute a new SEDA because they said the old one had issues on how it was constituted. So as of now, as much as alternative dispute resolution is taking place, and probably one of the reasons why we are seeing more people going to seek for formal ways of resolving a dispute, we need that body being reconstituted to allow for alternative dispute resolution, other than going to court per se. Lawyers will always charge their fee. Why? Because you cannot be a lawyer without consideration. It is there in the Advocates Act. The Act says, for you, once you're a lawyer, the first thing in your head is consideration. You cannot work for nothing. So these things which you see pro bono, what? Those ones, they happen at the beginning of your legal ladder. And you're really just doing a CSR. But after some time, you're asking yourself, I spent almost 10 years in school studying the law. Why am I out and I'm doing pro bono? For what? Listen, you paid heavily. By the time you're out of law school, actually, you're thinking of your first $1 million. You think of 100 million. Where is it coming from? I need to click a big deal. That's true. That is the mind of lawyers. But how many are trained lawyers? We now have about 2,000 lawyers in Uganda. More than that, because those are the ones who voted my friend back on track, Semakade. There were over 2,000 lawyers. That tells you that true access to justice is becoming easier for people, and this data speaks to the things I see in my community.
Thank you very much. While you were speaking, I saw Hope nodding in affirmation. I don't know whether I don't know whether your views resonated with hers from the Human Rights Commission. Maybe Hope you could help us understand whether this report aligns with what you observe at that collection point of, human rights issues across the country.
Is my mic on? Thank you very much. I would also like to add my voice to everyone else's to thank Afrobarometer for this insightful and data-backed report. Why I was agreeing with her, I'm a lawyer by training, so I was just laughing about the fact that you can't do pro bono forever. At one point, you'll have to charge. It's just the realities of life. We don't want to beat around the bush and lie to you here. And then in regard to the report in the aspect of human rights, this report has showed us that human rights are for human beings, and human rights start with our everyday personal spaces. For me, that has really resonated loudly. It reminds me of that statement by Ellen Roosevelt when she says, where after all do human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity, without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. For me, that's what has resonated with me with this report. As my colleague rightly said, the Ugandans are watching. They are becoming more aware. I'm happy about that, because as Uganda Human Rights Commission, we have the mandate to conduct civic education across the country. We have representation across the country. I saw in the report somewhere that they do know that they can come to our regional offices and report. That is a plus, because you cannot demand for what you do not know, and neither can you give what you do not have. So I'm happy that there is some ground. Ugandans are aware. They know these are our rights, and now we are working towards how do we make this a reality. And it's also speaking emphatically and reminding us as state actors that while doing the work that we are doing, you're doing it on behalf of the Ugandan. And you do have to do it within the parameters of the law, meaning you have to respect human rights while doing this particular work.
Thank you very much. I like where you have sort of like a footnote to your submission that everything be done within the parameters of the law. Unfortunately, more often than not, some people forget, and that's where I want to come to Dorothy. What does this report mean to you from the police perspective, especially some of those, the report can scratch somebody's back. Has this report scratched your back as a police officer at that level?
Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would begin by thanking Afrobarometer for this kind of report. It is very informative. And from the police perspective, definitely it aligns well with our mandate as police. From what has been brought out in the report, it clearly indicates that police has a crucial role to play in access to justice and observance of human rights. But it also brings out the concerns about how we do execute our mandate. It clearly brings out the concerns with adherence to the standards, both the standards that are set both nationally and internationally. But I would like to speak in line with our mandate. When you speak about access to justice, in line with our mandate, I would like to say that the landscape of access to justice is determined by a number of factors. And Uganda Police is just one of the actors in that line. So our mandate as an institution is limited to our mandate as put in the Constitution and in the Police Act. Ours is to enforce the law, and we do maintain the law and order. And when it comes to access to justice, it's our investigative function clearly comes out, where the role we play in access to justice is to ensure that we do adequate investigation, timely investigations, do conduct arrests in a proper way, and ensure that we bring these people to justice. And while we do that, we have to respect the rights of both the aggrieved parties, as well as the rights of the people in conflict with the law, if I may use the word, the suspects or the perpetrators. So for us as police, we do have to balance the mandate that we do execute in line with access to justice. And the other bit is when it comes to human rights, it is our role to promote and observe human rights in all aspects of policing. As clearly put in the report, it's good. The report also appreciates how much police has done, but we are not yet there. I must agree that we are not yet there, but there's a lot that has been done. And it was also well brought out in our most recent crime report. For example, it was indicated that there was a significant decline in the number of cases that are reported. And it was attributed not to how much we have done, but the commitment the police has done towards decentralizing our services. We have tried to work with the communities. There is a lot we have done regarding community policing, regarding bringing the services to our people, if I may also point out what our directorate has done. We have regional legal officers, and what is their role is to ensure that the human rights aspects are brought towards down to the lowest unit of the police. So the Uganda Police Force has done much,
Okay.
but we still have a long way to go. So the report is a clear reflection of what is going on. True, we have done what we can, but we are not yet there. Thank you.
Great. I'm happy that you've said the report is a clear reflection. So in other words, you would not depart from the findings of this report. Perry, you've been around, you've been an actor in this space of democracy, rights, and governance, and I know that some of the issues that have been highlighted in the report, you interface with them on a daily basis from the perspective of Women's Democracy Network. What observations do you make, and how do these interface? How do they align with your daily observations?
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, Afrobarometer, for the report. Three things that the report does. One, it sort of consolidates previous data. There's a report that was done on access to justice in 2021 by ONET, and the findings actually resonate with that report in terms of the costs of courts for those who want to access the courts. But what the report also does, it highlights the areas where we need to invest. We need to pass the National Legal Aid Bill in this country. That bill has been in Parliament for some time now. It has not been passed. Now, the fact that the rural population of this country is the most affected when it comes to access to justice means that they need help. My colleagues in the profession already said it's not easy to go through law school and come out and do pro bono. I mean, even doctors charge for their services. So we need a National Legal Aid Bill so that we can be able to address the needs of indigents. These are usually the most vulnerable in our communities, who are most affected when it comes to paying costs for courts. The report also shows that we need to invest more in the Uganda Police Force, because if 32% of the population is saying that is where they first report a case, that tells you it's an important institution. So as we deal with the castigation, why don't we look at the reasons why they continue to be rated as the most corrupt, Yet the population tells you we need their service. So we need to look at where is our money going when it comes to access to justice. I'll tell you that studies have shown that in terms of magistrates' courts, we need about 532, but right now they're just slightly over 200. In this country, the judicial circuits, these are the areas that judges cover. Each judicial circuit is supposed to have at least 2 judges. Right now we have only 1. So when we are talking about backlog of cases, part of this is because we have not invested in that sector. We need more judges. We need to ensure that we computerize the system of prosecution. Most police stations use a manual system. You take your case, it's written on paper. What is the guarantee that that paper won't get lost? So we need to invest more in the computerization of the prosecution of cases. There's already a system, but the numbers that have been computerized in terms of cases are too small. So even as we throw stones, we need to go back in-house and say, where is the problem? So for me, what this research does, it tells us where we should put our investment. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That's interesting. And from where you've ended, I want to now engage Hope. In one of the reports that Afrobarometer released last year, that was around issues of violence, the leading suppliers of violence, they are suppliers, and then there are those people who, happen to be the people that meet the violence, they have the first instance of violence. So among those, and I want to believe that many of the people here will agree with me, were state agencies, suppliers. Okay. So from the perspective of human rights, what mechanisms do you have or exist to hold state actors, including law enforcement, accountable for human rights abuses? Because what we have seen in this report speaks to the fact that disappearances, arbitrary killings, are high, and we've also seen arbitrary arrests, detentions, and these are by state actors, I want to believe, unless Francis wants to give more detail that is contrary to my view. But Hope, what mechanisms are there for you to hold state actors, including law enforcement like the police, accountable for human rights abuses?
Mechanisms that are in place for the Uganda Human Rights Commission to hold state actors accountable. Allow me to begin from the point that I referred to earlier on, that while implementing the different mandates as state actors, we have to implement them in accordance with the law and also while respecting human rights. That is a constitutional guarantee. It is provided for. Also, whether it's security agencies, whether it's different MDAs, all have to ensure that they are respecting human rights while conducting their mandates. So the mechanisms that we have as Uganda Human Rights Commission, we are all aware that it's a constitutional body. We are the national human rights institution, and we are mandated to protect and promote human rights across the country. And we do this through different ways, one of which is we have to prepare a report on the state of human rights annually and present this to Parliament. And in turn, Parliament has a Human Rights Committee on Human Rights Affairs, and then it then tasks the different agencies to show cause why the things we're talking about in the report are not being implemented. So, but what am I building to? In regard to enforced disappearances, as the Uganda Human Rights Commission, we have reported on this in detail, particularly in our 24th annual report. It's available on our website, and there are copies even at the office as well. And we have categorically stated that we received complaints of these things happening, and we continue to see this happening. And when in this report, when this was presented to Parliament, if you remember then, the Ministry of Internal Affairs was tasked to provide information on where are these people that have been allegedly or have been abducted by the different security agencies. Though there were different discrepancies between what the Internal Affairs Ministry was presenting and what the people out there were complaining about. So we do receive these complaints, we do report on them at the national level, and we do engage with the different security agencies. That is at the higher level, whereby the chairperson and the members do meet with the top leadership of the security agencies, and they agree. Or we remind each other that you have to make sure that the work you're doing is in line with respect of human rights. And then also we are continually advocating to the government of Uganda to see that we do ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. Because Article 23 is categorically clear. Nobody should be in any way subjected to arbitrary detention. If you're to be subjected to arbitrary detention, it should be in line with the laws that you committed an offense. It is well known. You're tried through the processes that are provided for under the law, and then the matter is handled to its logical conclusion. Does that mean that these things do not happen? They do. They do happen. Human rights is work in progress, and we continue to hold and urge government to ensure that this is not happening, particularly the state actors, the security agencies rather, that this is not happening. And the perpetrators that are doing this, if people are alleging someone came in a uniform of a particular security agency, hold these people to account, because there has to be a chain of command. People don't just wake up in the morning and do what they are doing. So we do report on it. The mechanisms that we do report to Parliament. We do investigate the particular matters. We do create awareness and continue to advocate that these particular laws, the international level, national and regional, are enforced in Uganda as a state that is saying we're doing everything we're doing under the tenements of democracy.
Just a follow-up on that. Does the Commission have the stinging ability to bring these people to book, or it's just, advisory? Because, you know, more often than not, we've seen you engage, you know, over a cup of tea and all that. And then what we know, somehow things disappear into the oblivion. And then we've also, like you've just said, somebody comes and reports to you that this person came, you know, dressed in such and such a uniform, which you can attach to a particular agency. Have we seen instances where individual perpetrators have been brought to book, or they are covered under the blanket of protection because they are doing their work?
I'll begin with the issue, do we have the stinging effect? Yes, we do. In that particular report I'm telling you about, when we received the numerous complaints, a number of people were released. It's documented in the report. You can refer to that annual report, or the 24th annual report, on page 77. Clearly detailed, names provided for. And then the ability for individuals. We are all aware of the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act that provides for personal liability. We have moved away from the blanket liability. And there are cases in the commission. Maybe now what I'm picking from here is to amplify more on these things. Because even the report, well, if I remember, Francis, I hope I get the name right, Francis, when he was speaking about it, he says when he interacts with the different state actors, something is being done. It's not like people are seated back and folding their hands. Maybe what I'm picking from here, what we need to do better, is amplify that good, because it seems it is disappearing in the other negatives that do arise. So the law is clear. We can now go for you individually. And now for almost all matters pertaining to torture that are reported, they go for the individual or officer. Why? Because under the blanket angle, people tend to not to be bothered. After all, you'll go for the bigger arm, not for me. Yeah. But if it can bite to the person, or to the person, and then we believe we can see this disappear. And also, human rights is work in progress. We cannot say we have not done anything in human rights. We would be lying, honestly speaking. There is something, there's a base, but we are saying we can do something. We can do better.
Great.
Because all of us want to thrive in a country where human rights are respected and we are feeling comfortable.
Great. We long to see that point, that time when we'll stop seeing maybe Francis Chibidige versus Attorney General, and at that time, the whole thing changes to, Francis Chibidige versus Charity Imbisibwe. In a human rights, where Charity is a police officer or an army officer.
I think we're on a good trajectory because we are living in very informed times.
Okay.
We can agree, all of us here in this room, that there are things that maybe would have been done 10 years or 15 years ago, but now someone knows that people are aware and they can make noise about this. I have
Great.
to tread carefully.
Thank you very much. Robert Sempala, I want to turn to you. We've seen increasing cases where Ugandans are reporting some of these cases. She has just concluded her concluding note. People go and report these cases, and we've seen that there is an increased level of awareness. I think Dorothy talked about, how the police have reached out to the public. They have decentralized their work, and a lot of it has been done thanks be to the Fourth Estate, informing the public, even educating them on their rights, what they are supposed to do. And I want to believe that state and non-state institutions use the media a lot. Would like to hear from you, Robert. How does the media contribute to shaping the public perceptions of justice and human rights in Uganda? Because when you look at this report, the ability of people to report is also comes from the fact that people know that this is a right that has been infringed on. Okay? How has the media helped in shaping the public perception on justice and human rights in Uganda? Robert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. And I want to thank my colleagues that have discussed the report in more details. The media is a vehicle for all human rights. It cuts across. And that's why we say that they are the fourth estate In any case, they are the ears and eyes of the public. Many people prefer to report to the media where they think that those power holders will be provoked to come and act than even running to the power holders themselves. The media has severally worked around to investigate and bring to the fore the blatant abuse of the law, gross abuse of power, public resources, name it. And their reports have been found to be very credible because they are hinged on speaking to the real people that are in the thick of things. And the fact that the media does an overall watchdog role and acts on behalf of the public, you are sure that it has done a lot of sensitization. Many media houses I am aware of have space to talk about the state of human rights, democratization, um, name it, and it is in those spaces that people have severally contributed their opinions and public perceptions to the issues at hand and influenced course of events. We have seen the media exposing torture for suspects. We have seen the media holding the powerful accountable, where, for instance, even when the Kawempe North by-elections were not part of this research, we have seen journalists, just like in this recent election, in other elections, bringing to the fore those that are torturing the civilians, the politicians, and exposing them, unmasking them, trying to impress it upon the leadership of the different security forces that, look, if you are scanty on information, this is it. We have it for you to take action. However, the unfortunate bit is that very little action has been taken to hand justice to the victims. We have seen in courts where the journalists have brought suspects that are presented in court with visible marks of torture. Some are limping, they can hardly stand, and they even tell courts that they are tortured. But then the courts have not helped, because even despite the presence of the anti-torture law, the courts have gone ahead to try these suspects, even to send them back to prisons. And I am very happy that the media has done its bit, brought into discussion these different abuses and violations. Because the report talks a lot about violations, but we also have abuses where such heinous crimes have been committed by members of the public, the communities, and not government officials, because violations accrue to those that are in key government positions. So we have also seen the Uganda Human Rights Commission do a tremendous job despite the challenges, especially summoning security forces to come and answer to situations where there are questionable levels in terms of observation of human rights. However, we have not seen how this trickles through to their mindset change and actions. The media has been very categorically spot on in trying to show the state at hand and even after these interactions. But that's not to mean that the Human Rights Commission has not done its part. It really has. For instance, those reports that are annual, presented to Parliament, let alone released to us, and then robust discussions happen around. However, the misgiving is how much has Parliament done to impact these reports, to bring to book the perpetrators, to question them. Most of the reports, very beautiful as they are, have gone unattended to in its real sense of making an impact. So the media has also been able to look at this area. The media has been able to turn tables around in areas that would have been left hitherto in the dark. Areas of corruption, which directly impact the enjoyment of rights of many other Ugandans. The media has been spot on in exposing the corrupt, tracking public finances and how they've been siphoned to private usage, that's a very, very notable key area that the media has done. Literally, everybody will bear with us that despite the challenges that the media has faced from time to time, especially of harassment, intimidation, um, 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 administrative sanctions, closure, like recently when Pearl of Africa Radio was closed down by a regulator UCC before being given a hearing and a fair decision being reached. So, but generally, the media has faced it all, even where we all know that it is, muzzled from time to time by the different actors. It has stood its ground and contributed to the state of human rights and justice in this country. I must commend the media myself.
Well, thank you very much. I flipped back to this report, and on this page, I think it is on the fourth last page, which has a section on where Ugandans report first when faced with a human rights violation. I have seen on some instances, there are some spaces where, the time I was a journalist, I met a situation where a girl had been raped. Sorry, not raped, but defiled by their own relative. And she didn't want to speak to anybody in the family because they would be told to keep quiet. And so they felt like a journalist would expose this issue. So while looking at this, I was wondering whether journalists have at a certain point been interfaced with an ongoing situation where they are the first incidents of getting this information and putting it out there. Maybe Francis will at a later time respond, because yes, I know, and even the journalists here may know that sometimes there is some information out there that somebody has, but because of the fear. Somebody at one point got a police cape, a beret, the black beret, and they were like, now, what do I do with it? I think the police officer, while being whisked away, dropped it. This person picked it, and they were like, if I keep it and they find me with it, I will be in trouble. Because they could say, you killed a police officer, where did you get it? So they were like, now, how do I go about it? It may not be a human rights issue at that point, but it could result into an issue, because they were like, if I take it, I'm going to be asked more questions than the answers I have. So I think the journalists have, I feel, from my own perspective. Nevertheless, thank you very much, Robert. But I wanted to just, as a follow-up, on what you've just discussed. How are journalists able to balance between objective reporting with the need to advocate for the human rights and justice of the people within community? Because at times we can get taken up. The story comes, one of the things that journalists do is, I want to be the one to break the story. Sometimes you fail to go into the details of finding the objective truth, and you instead go by what you've heard. That balance, Robert, could you help us, that balance between objective reporting with the need to, advocate for human rights and justice?
Yeah, thank you once again, Doctor. We are very sure that most of us know how the media works, but to wrap it up on how it works, when they are sourcing out for stories, they look at the impact, the timeliness, the proximity, how close this news is to the people, and who is involved in there. Most cases really require that they are broken more urgently than taking forever, because that's the first instance of triggering discussions and debate. You sometimes do not have the luxury of investigating a story for 1 week until you report about it. But there are those nature of stories where journalists have taken forever, investigated, gotten all their facts, and then unearthed in detailed reports. And those are called normal report, Namutaika, Yes Investigates, NTV report, the different areas that require different nature of reportage. But in this particular case, journalists and objectivity in the face of human rights is a very delicate balance to strike, because like one journalist one time said that in the face of injustice, you cannot claim to be objective, because it's a key requirement for journalists all to observe. But where one is violating or abusing other one's rights, it's not imperative that you have to be very objective and then seek for the other side. They might not want to talk to you for 1 month or so, and then you say you won't do your story because you need to be seen to be objective, and the other side is not yielding. So you go ahead and report the story, to have an impact created and is on the instant. But it is also a key requirement that journalists literally try to factor in the issue of rights, the issue of what the impact of their reportage might be. And that's why, at some point, Parliament was introducing amendments to the Computer Misuse Amendment Act, to the Computer Misuse Act. Although, in a nutshell, they try to usurp the right to everyone to expressing themselves and the work of the journalists. If, as it is now, it is being certainly used to gag the media from touching mainly issues of human rights and its abuse, issues of abuse of office and power. And that's why we, together with 12 other entities, in terms of lawyers, in terms of human rights bodies, are in court, the Constitutional Court, challenging the purpose and intention of the amendments. But generally, is really trying to strike a. However, we need to distinguish between the legacy media, which does all the ones that I'm talking about, and then the onlines, we call them the social media, or the new media, which many times is manned by an individual or two who constitute themselves into the reporters, into the editors, into the directors and producers. Everything is hinged on them. That is where we need to, have a review on how to progress in terms of other one's rights and in terms of delivering information, and then not a gagging expression, because that is an inherent right. Once you're born, you have your right to expression. So we need to have a discussion around that area. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that elaborate response. I come to you, Charity. Afrobarometer say, let the people have a say. And you've been engaged with the citizens on quite a number of platforms for, you have a rich vein of experience. From your perspective, how do you think citizens can be better empowered to understand and demand their rights and access to justice? Because what we have seen here, there are those who, at some point feel like, even if I go, nothing much. If I have a case with somebody in a better financial position than I am, doesn't make sense. Francis here was saying that, they will pretend, they will go to court, but they will actually not be there. But, I mean, for the rank and file of Uganda, how can they be better empowered to demand, first of all, to understand, and then demand their rights and access to justice?
So that question only begs for one answer, that there is need for continuous civic education more than voter education. Voter is when we are at the time of voting, but now civic education. Because people are saying we don't know our rights, and it is true. Many of them don't know their rights. And I think somewhere in the data I disagreed with the issue of LC1 courts. Why? Because even LC1 courts are courts of first instance, if you look on the question of jurisdiction. Yes, they have issues where they handle particular matters, especially customary law, land. My legal friend there from FIDA is already shaking her head, but I'm telling you that they are And affirmatively, I can confirm that from the Law Development Center. They are a court of first instance on some matters. So you should go and find out. Please go do your homework, but they are a court of first instance. So in the data that came out today, I had expected that those local courts should be empowered more. People trust them more. They trust the elders. They trust those local courts. Why? Because they can easily access them. Now, when we say civic education, we mean you alert the citizens to where their first points of justice are, and which points of justice are cheap for them, without necessarily thinking about the higher options. So when they tell you, oh, we don't know, we don't have this information, we don't even know our rights. Some of them don't even know they have a right to go and report to police and not be charged any money in police. Some of them think the moment I go to police, I have to have some money to pay for them to record my issue or my violation. Some of them also don't know what amounts to a human rights violation. Because for you to understand that your right has been violated, you should know the right. What is that right? Right to freedom of expression, right to access to justice. So you must know the right that is being, right to assemble. What does it mean for you to have a right to assemble? That I can assemble with other people who are like-minded. What does it mean for me to have a right to associate? And what are the limits for my right? All that needs to be raised to the people through civic education and awareness, promotion of those rights.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. But, more often than not, Ugandans have taken, a back seat. They have, I don't know whether it's because they feel there's nothing much I can change about the situation. So they have, when you expect them to be, on the front foot, they have taken a back seat and said, well, I know so-and-so in a matter, if I went to court with them, I want to win after all. And I think what you raise is very, very important, that civic education, civic engagement is one very important thing for us to undertake. Perry, I'm coming to you because you deal with, I think, more of women, and women have averagely suffered a little more injustice than the men. In some instances, we have practices that exacerbate injustice against women, and yet it is men that are mostly at the front of doing some of these things. From your perspective, how do you describe the current state of civic space in Uganda, especially for activists and human rights defenders?
I think you know my answer. It's shrinking. And I think the context tells you it's shrinking. That's why there's a lot of censorship, by the way. I always joke with my colleagues that even on Twitter, some women are afraid to like certain posts, even when the like is anonymous. So, there's this saying, once bitten, twice shy. Charity and myself have been in these waters, and we have been banned in a number of instances. But I think for me, it's the realization that for you to be able to enjoy something, especially when it's a right, in our context, you must continue to fight for it. Because once your voice goes silent, then the person who wants to take that right from you feels more emboldened. And I think for many of the people I interact with, they are exposed to different types of violence. And you see, that's why I like the fact that the report disaggregated the information in terms of what women and men were saying. Because there are certain violations that women will suffer, which men may not suffer. And the magnitude may vary. For instance, sexual violence. for women when they are in a place where they are illegally, a place which is not legal in terms of detention. Your first instinct is what is going to happen to me. And that is why I said investing in police becomes critical. And ensuring that those who, for instance, go and make an arrest or commit violations while covering their faces with masks, that should not even be happening in a civilized country. Because every time you cover your face, that means you know what you're doing is wrong. And it is difficult to hold people accountable if they are anonymous. Because if I cannot see your face and I'm taken to a court of law to identify the perpetrator, it's impossible. And if you're following world events right now, one of the issues that is going on in Philippines, there was a time when the president then was killing, I think, commanded for those who were alleged to be drug dealers to be shot. Right now he's in The Hague. Why am I saying this? Is that those with the highest authority must exercise their mandate to ensure that we enjoy human rights. Because an officer can easily say, I was commanded. You know, even when we have a human rights enforcement law, the people who are in charge of these officers must be held accountable. They must take responsibility to ensure that we don't have people who are arresting civilians wearing masks, because that takes away the element of accountability. People must be identified for their actions. For human rights to be enforced, we must be able to ensure that we know the perpetrator. So for women, the fact that they get afraid that the violations may be different is why at times they are hesitant to take the risk. For the youth, and you see whenever we say youth, most people, the first youth is male. But we also have female youth who are very engaged, who want to be engaged in the politics of this country, in the civic life of this country. But the context has become hostile. You're beaten for just expressing yourself. You're beaten for just belonging to a different political party. I mean, at times for us who have been in the field for some time, we're watching and they're like, what do we want as a country? Because if you're saying you want the young people to be involved, you must create a conducive environment where they have their voices heard, where they can be able to tell you, look, I disagree with you. And that's why these researchers are very important, because then you're hearing voices of ordinary Ugandans saying, this is where the problem is. And for me, my call is for all the duty bearers to pay attention, because this country is bigger than any of us. So that for me is my call. And that's why I appreciate Dorothy when she says we are going to take this seriously. I think what Ugandans want to see is, okay, you have heard these statistics. You have heard our voices. What are you going to do to address the problem? And I think creating more awareness in terms of what the police are doing when they say there is progress in terms of dispensing justice, what the courts are doing when they say there's progress, the public must know. Now, for some of us, we are privy to certain information. For instance, I know that there are court days. There are days when the judiciary goes out to try and tell the population about what they are doing. But how many Ugandans know that this is happening? The bench, which is the judges, have what I call a gender bench book. They have a book on gender. And that tells you they have to be sensitive to the differences. But how many Ugandans know this? Most Ugandans don't know. And that's why the judiciary, the police, they must invest in public awareness to say, we have heard your voices, this is what we are doing, and this is how we want you to help us to become better. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I like the zeal and, you know, the passion you have, despite the challenges of the shrinking space in your words. And while you were speaking, you sort of gave plaudits to Dorothy. And I want now to come to Dorothy. How, I mean, as SSP, you're a senior officer. And as a senior officer, how would security agencies like the police and others ensure that justice and human rights are upheld in a law enforcement operation? How? Because Francis said that, you know, this report, by the time they did the study, It was way back, before we saw the incidents of 2 weeks back. But 2 weeks back, we saw the men in security trying, I don't know, I'm using the word trying, to strike the balance between enforcement of the law, but they also had a duty to ensure that the rights of people like the ordinary, the wananchi and the journalists are protected. So help us understand how, in an ideal environment, how would they balance the two?
Picking from my last statement when I was concluding on the first question, I told you that this report is a true reflection of what is happening in the country. But I want to bring out the fact that as much as it is a true reflection, we are dealing with issues of knowledge, issues of attitudes, issues of mindset or perceptions. It's what comes out. My perception is different from another person's perception. So as law enforcers, as an officer, when I'm in the field and to strike a balance between my job, the job of law, the duty of enforcing the law and protecting human rights. First, I have to look at what the law provides, because we do not operate in a vacuum. We do operate in the law. And how do we ensure that it is done? We have to ensure that we exhibit professionalism while we are executing our mandate. We have to ensure that we do respect the human rights of both, if say the aggrieved party, you're saying the aggrieved party, and then the person who wants me to protect him, because I am one of the mandate is to ensure that you protect life and property. For example, if I'm in the field. So I have to ensure that I'm impartial. The competency is also important. The skills that we have as police officers do enable us to deliver our policing services in a human rights compliant manner. So I don't know whether I have answered your question, but I mean, it is the professionalism, it is the compliancy, it is the competency, and the knowledge and the skills that we have as police officers that can enable us deliver our policing mandate in a human rights compliant manner.
Okay, I could borrow a leaf from the experiences of Kawempe because they still apply.
Yes.
We saw instances where command and control giving, instructions and the action taking a different. So how do you, for instance, you are in command and control, how do you bring errant officers that are, hell-bent on abusing the rights of people back to order?
Okay, thank you. Of course, as an institution, we have done a lot of sensitizations to the personnel. A lot of sensitizations regarding torture, regarding how we arrest, arbitrary arrests. When you're conducting investigations, you must ensure that you must investigate first before you do arrests. But what comes out at times is not what we do expect. So what do we do? There's a lot of internal mechanisms, definitely, that deal with errant officers. We have cases of, we have, for example, PSU that does conduct investigations in cases of human rights violations, or even where officers do, for example, engage in cases of torture. We have PSU to investigate, and as already has been alluded to, we have the individual responsibility issues whereby the law is very clear. It gives redress to whoever is aggrieved, whoever has been whose rights have been violated has a means of seeking redress. The law is very clear. So the legal framework that we do operate in enables us to ensure that the people are given the services in the right manner. But what I want to say is that while we do sensitizations, definitely for us, we are duty bearers. Normally, we do sensitization. That's why I was saying we do sensitizations. We also dialogue with the community. While we sensitize our officers, we also ensure that we are partnering with the civil society and some NGOs to ensure that even the public is also sensitized, because for us we have a duty to deliver the services in a human rights compliant manner, but even the people also have obligations to ensure that the wherever we operate from, they also know what they ought to do for us to be able to deliver. Because it's not only one-sided, it is two-way. Because normally we tell people that you are the first line of protection. Before I come to you, you should also be knowing what you need, how to even get it.
Great. Thank you very much. I think in a way that helps us, share a picture. Although, I mean, even with all that, the shady area remains the fact that, I am hooded, I am completely, I think it also becomes difficult for you when you are the one in charge of command and control to tell that, this is a person who did this because I am hooded, I don't have, a tag on me. But coming to the audience, I'd like to pick some thoughts from Uganda Law Society.
Yes, thank you so much, moderator. My name is Gaudius Turiasingra from ULS. First of all, I wish to appreciate Afrobarometer for inviting us to be part of this launch of this very wonderful report. I shall state that this survey report cements previous works in confirming the fact that justice is one of the core needs of Ugandans. And very many Ugandans are seeking justice-related services. People talk of water, education, but justice in this era is one of the core needs of Ugandans. Secondly, Charity mentioned the fact that ULS has over 2,000. I can confirm that ULS has over 6,000 registered advocates. And all these are out there offering legal and related services to Ugandans. Now, ULS offers legal aid services, and I can state that that one actually captures the fact that, because when you look at the number of people that come to our legal aid services, it confirms the fact that we have very many Ugandans that are really out there having different legal problems. And I can assure you that even ULS plus FIDA, Justice Center, and other legal aid service providers, we cannot even sufficiently support the number of people that are seeking these. And this is why legal aid service providers have been advocating for the passing of the legal aid bill. And the government is still reluctant for some reasons. And but for us as ULS, we still say that the legal aid bill needs to be considered to ensure that Ugandans are enabled to access justice.
Thank you.
This research is going to be very critical in terms of interventions, because you cannot start an intervention without data. So this research is going to do a very good job for us.
I thank Afrobarometer for this initiative. We as the Office of the Prime Minister, we are the lead of government business in Parliament, and we coordinate all government policies, programs. So with me, my take is, first I will start with with what I expected to get, the policy recommendations that you want the government to take on. So I think it is key we pick out the policy recommendations that we wish government should take on, because we have invested a lot of resources in this work and we're still investing. Then two, still I'm of the view that we should get, how can I say it? We can get a patron in a given, say, ministry. If it is parliament, it is executive, because for us we are an executive, who should support us in following up these recommendations we have to do. If you say maybe it is parliament, let parliament task whichever arm of government to take on whatever recommendations we have taken. So basically that's what I see, that after here, what next? How do we take on the findings I submit? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Francis, in his presentation, said that this is just a summary. The report is uploaded onto their website, so it can be accessed, and I'm sure there are various policy recommendations thereunder that can be looked at. But also, from the analytical perspective, I think it is equally easy to extract policy issues from this report. Just looking at it, there are some of those things. They've just been talking about, for instance, he's also talked about the legal aid, bill. That's one of the things. So we could be looking at, what is making people, for instance, opt not to go to court. If we're talking about the costs being high, wouldn't that be a policy gap plugged by the legal aid bill? It would definitely. So yeah, in itself, the report points to, some of those things that can be looked at and extracted from that perspective. And again, like you've said, yes, it is the executive, and your primary role is legislation. You generate the policy proposals, which I think would be very important, looking at this report and say, okay, there are findings which should actually buttress, why is the legal bill still, shelved? The findings, the voices of Ugandans are saying that, look, there is something that ought to be done. I think that's one of the easiest ways to take it on. But let's move the microphone to him from the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. In 2 minutes, what are your quick thoughts? What are your takeaways?
Yes, thank you. Once again, Namaka Jodero Frederick is my name. And one, I will start with the issue that Robert Sempala talked about the media being on the forefront and in promotion of human rights. I want to relate this to the recent by-elections in Kawempe, where we all witnessed all media houses that were covering the by-election coming out and saying, we are pulling out. And the executive director, Human Rights Network for Journalists, is saying, and we all agree, that the fourth state has really been on the forefront of promoting human rights using the lenses. And now we are having the media houses just in the by-election saying we are pulling out, we are no longer covering this by-election. So the question is, what are we yet to witness in the forthcoming 2026 general elections? Are we having the fourth state still being on the forefront of promoting human rights and protecting human rights by using the lenses come 2026? If not, what shall happen to the victims? Two, when we talk about access to justice, and I will limit myself to disappearances, out of experience, I'm also from the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative, because I happen to be under the Department of the Legal Services Division, and that is the department offering legal aid and pro bono services. I remember during the 2020 elections, or the electioneering year, we had a lot of disappearances and abductions recorded by the fourth state again. You see, when you go to the fourth state in the media, you have to get a lot, or many number of cases of abductions and disappearances if you are to base on the media reports. But if you are to go to various documented reports through CSOs or even government bodies, you realize that the number will have to vary. Out of experience, at one point in a time, we called people to come and report or lodge complaints with us so that we can help them follow up with abductions and disappearing cases. I assure you in that year, maximum we had to record, we had to record around 10. And in the media, we had like 100 disappearance cases. So the question is what? And this is what we came up with just in addition to why people don't lodge or don't open up cases with court. One, most of them fear to be victims like what their relatives really are going through. An example, one of the person who, the brother was arrested, abducted, and up to now disappeared. We tried to go through all the safe houses, all like basing on our connections and whatever, what we can do. And this person was like, please and please and please don't reveal to anyone that I'm the one complaining on behalf of my brother, because I fear to go through the same process of being disappeared. So the end result with the help of Afrobarometer research is, one, it is hoping out to give us clear statistics as in the way of bridging gaps between the media statistics vis-a-vis the organizations or the MDA's statistics, clearly, because the statistics are totally different. And three, to know exactly the feel of a person down. Why is it that they're not coming out openly to claim justice on behalf of their relatives? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your views. I think you are still cementing what we've just talked about, the need for the legal aid bill.
I would like to thank, of course, Afrobarometer and all the associated stakeholders. This is no doubt a very good report. But like any other report, further work can be done. For me, three things come to mind. One is that as stakeholders at this point, we can only give life to this report if we can pick it up, strategize, and see how it is further discussed. When the main investigator was discussing the findings, one thing that came to my mind was that it is important in such perception studies to underscore at the period of the study or the time of the study, what, especially for a human rights report like this, what was captured as then political trends existing at the time. Because as you see, this report is transitory. So when you keep going back, you keep realizing that the context at the time the report was done should have been captured to give us that variance. And you see, like this one, there was an attempt to give an explanation or a disclaimer, not to link it up with Kawempe. But you see, as a perception report, that time coincidence waffles it up. And this can also give opportunity to detractors, to begin trying to water the report down. Secondly, the other thing I'm thinking about is that beyond this, in terms of how do you take this forward, is the media, our media partners. Just like you also pointed out, I also learned myself, I was in the media for many years. Reporting data and statistics to make meaning is not particularly a cup of tea for people in the media. So for me, as a follow-up to this report, and particularly that there is a main report, there could be a special session for the media to help them learn to try and make meaning out of particularly quantitative data. As we see, this is heavy with quantitative data. But what are the thinkings around it? The other last thing is the issue of causal correlations, and which I think for me is much more important. The man from the Human Rights Foundation has tried to allude to it. This is the other thing I'm saying. We have a situation because, you know, you have almost this 50, 60, 40, 50 occurrence of data. It shows you that there is need to subject the findings to much more qualitative, what would you call it, variables. And one of them, I would think that would obviously work, and in the situation of Uganda, is the question of securitization. Aritua pointed out something interesting, and this is my last point, that how then, in terms of demand for governance, can we factor in a political economic lens? How do you vary and rationalize the question of choice to spend? You know, we're talking about parliament, but does parliament have the ability to be able to deduce cost-benefit analysis through some of these reports? Because securitization has become an issue. The government has found a quick way, you know, to create a facade of a pending security threat to justify defense budgets. But it's really a facade. And oftentimes, if you go through the structural abuses, which we are seeing now more than anything else, because government is now using policies to basically restrict, or all of them, Computer Act, all these things. So you find that they are able to hide behind that and securitize. Up to the Gombolola now, there is an intelligence officer. You know? Parish level, there's an intelligence officer. So that means almost in a village, there is an intelligence officer. So you find that from the word go, you feel you are in bondage. How then do you become civic? And that is probably why we see the level of reporting is high, but there's no causal relationship with action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I hear you right, you are in other words saying that if we're going to make a detailed sense and use of this report, we need to understand the political economy at the time it was undertaken. I mean, so that we know what informs decision making, what are the correlations in terms of what could have informed the perceptions and the responses of the public. Thank you very much. Let's move the microphone to Dr. here from Ndeje, and we'll end it with the Canon Grace Kaiso.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that I'm part of the team to listen to this data. I only missed one person in this room, and that is His Excellency the President. When you get this kind of data coming through, you feel sorry that the person of the President is not able to get this kind of data, and he migrates his arguments from the experiences of 1986. Because there is now current information that can inform the public in making more realistic assessment of what government has been able to achieve and where government has failed. I'm grateful for this information, but I would like to ask Afrobarometer if they can make a way of teasing out a scorecard on justice. The challenge we have today is that our society has turned completely qualitative. People explain their performance through a lot of explanation, we have a lot of people talking. The reason people talk a lot and we have many talk shows that don't yield to anything is because people are going qualitative. They are explaining things that could easily be told in statistics. I would have expected my sister from Uganda Police to give us a simple analysis of what they have been able to do last year in regard to disciplining police officers. How many were convicted for crimes committed against abuse of human rights? We have no such data. We are not hearing from police if they have even been able to track down on these police vehicles that continuously abduct people and dump them wherever they dump them. No information. We've not had police committing itself that we are setting up a rule for people who are disappearing mysteriously and yet they're being abducted from community, from society. There is an effort to get at least to force these security agencies to report to the nearest police station and provide information. So you realize the journey to justice for Uganda is still a long one. Reason being, I think government has lost interest or it is overwhelmed to provide justice anymore. And the biggest challenge Uganda is facing now is the issue of impunity. Everybody is important. Everybody is more connected to whoever they are connected to. And at the end of the day, if you want to go to a court, I mean, whom are you going to find in the court who is not already connected to the person who is accusing you? And I like the new trend Ugandans have decided to take on, using the media as a source of justice. Take your story to Bukede, let Bukede play it 1,000 plus times, let the Bukede bring your grandmother and everybody in the picture. When people get enough embarrassment, they start now opting, can we go back to courts of law? But these courts of law are being induced by the pressure image, and thanks to social media, it's still small, but it's also impacting in its own way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You've spoken like somebody in the academia. I think your references within, if you tell the president to migrate his mindset from 1986, he will tell you that the reason he's sticking to the data of 1986 is because that's a baseline. A baseline, but you know, it has certainly been overtaken by so many recent publications like we are talking about today. Finally, Canon Grace Kaiso.
Allow me also to appreciate the team at Afrobarometer for reflecting back to us what is going on in our society. I take this as a mirror of what is taking place. And ordinarily, when you use a mirror, you must come to the mirror with a certain kind of mindset. The mindset is that you need to change, isn't it? You need to do something about what you see. So my sense is that I think the report is about the image of our country. And we take seriously the issue of image, how we present ourselves before others. And for a country like ours that has suffered greatly from negative image, it is in our interest to try and see how we improve our image. I think that we are caught up with a duty, a responsibility, because shaping the image of our country is not only the responsibility of our duty bearers, for instance, but is a collective responsibility of all the citizens. And therefore, we need to appreciate the task before us, the task that this report presents before us as a shared responsibility of reshaping the image of our country. We need to move from looking at this as a task of our duty bearers only. I think for me, it is how do we transform, make this a way of life, the way of justice, a way of life for every citizen, so that the process of transforming this culture of violence, of impunity, is tackled at every stage, at every point of formation, if you like. How do we cultivate a culture of justice in our homes? So we need to be some attention there. How do we invest in empowering parents to live and be examples of justice, to create mechanisms of justice in our families? Because it must start there. But also, in our institutions of learning, what mechanisms of justice are there? I remember one school, Namusagali, I think you remember, there was the Father Grimes. He created a culture within the school where there was a justice system, that if a child committed an offense, there were lawyers who could go to and share concerns. There were judges. And so from the school experience, the young people began to appreciate the values of institutions of justice and how they can be used. But in many of our schools, what is there? Nothing. So I think the challenge of transforming this culture of impunity to a culture of justice must be spread, this responsibility must be spread to everybody and not only to the duty bearers.
Thank you very much.
My name's Gerald Pade Auku, and I work with Transparency International Uganda. First of all, the findings is a true reflection of what is happening in our country. What I can say in terms of comment is that there is a clear link between justice, human rights, and corruption. When you look at the findings, you clearly see that. However, my question is, we shun from mentioning the animal that we usually call corruption. And this is it's not only in this report, but also most of the reports that relates to this subject matter. For example, I want to draw your attention to the finding on the most important reasons. The most important reason, disputes are not taken to formal court. The responses are, in terms of answers, are correct. But my concern is, especially when it comes to, these are just examples, response do not expect fair treatment. That's one of the reasons that was put forward. And to me, this is corruption. And that's why I'm saying we shun from mentioning it, and yet we know it has an impact. And then the other one is courts favor the rich and the poor. What I'm trying to say, let's call a spade a spade. This is corruption. These are just examples among the key findings that I saw in the report. And I would argue Afrobarometer in the future to, if something relates to corruption, please speak about it. Let it be corruption.
Thank you very much.
As I conclude, I think this will give us an opportunity as a lead and corruption organization to draw a link between these findings and corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My attention has been drawn to, just a moment. What comes to the mind when Ugandans hear the phrases human rights violations And as a journalist, my attention is on the first one, curtailing the freedom of expression, assembly, and association. As a person who defends the rights of journalists, I also every year take part in compiling the Global Press Freedom Index. And when you look at the situation of Uganda, every year it gets worse and worse. And as we go towards the election, we already saw what happened in Kawempe. That was just testing what we are going to expect. And when somebody asked, what will happen if media pulls away, or what will not happen? And that's exactly being reflected here. The situation we're going through clearly tells us that what we're expecting in 2025, 2026 elections is going to be worse than what we had witnessed. Some of us covered the 2020, 2021 elections, and you saw exactly how the opposition was treated. So when we look at these things, I get scared as a journalist. When somebody asks, what would you expect a journalist? How would you expect others to support a journalist? We know that journalists are not supposed to be beaten when they're on duty. What did not happen in Kawempe? What did not happen in 2021? So it's the report is spot on. It's a big challenge for us. I feel I sympathize with the Dorothy when she presents what they are supposed to do and what happens. If you go to police, you know that the guys who take charge of these things are actually not professional police officers. If we went around and said, who is doing what, I would pick 10 out of possibly 15 people and say, these are men who are supposed to be at Mbuya or who are supposed to be at Bombo, but they are at Naguru.
Thank you very much.
3 takeaways for me. One is we need to pass the National Legal Aid Bill. I mean, this is what the report says in essence. It doesn't state it, but if you look at the challenges for most Ugandans, it is access to justice is affected by the cost. So pass the National Legal Aid Bill, that's to Parliament, so that more Ugandans can access justice. The second is we must end impunity. And we end it by holding those who abuse rights accountable. There's no two-way about it. Because once you don't hold people accountable, impunity thrives. The third is we must publicize what these institutions of government are doing to address these issues. What is the judiciary doing? What is the police doing? And I think the lecturer from Ndeje was spot on when she said we need to know. If you say police is disciplining people, how many, for what cases? That's what builds confidence. Once the citizens see that there's action on what they say is not going well, then you get more of them to own these institutions and to also play their part in ensuring that there's increased access to justice and observance of human rights. Thank you.
As Uganda Human Rights Commission, if people are saying they don't know their rights, meaning civic education has to be taken a notch higher. This calls for more funding to see that we reach as many people as we can. If we are saying that police, LCs are courts of first instances, or the person that everybody knows, because that's the truth. Let's deal with truth and fact. As your auntie or your grandmother or your local person at the grassroots, if they have an issue, what comes to their mind? LC1 or police. So how are we funding these people? How are we funding these institutions to deliver? Remember what I said earlier, we cannot give what we don't have. And also we alluded to the lawyers. We are saying these lawyers are not giving you the free services. They didn't go to school necessarily. It's the truth to provide free services. So it is, let's provide the funding for the different mandate holders, then hold them accountable. Because you have set the standard, but they're not moving up to the standard. Then also, we should be able to hold everybody accountable. Nobody should be above the law. People should be held accountable for violating human rights. Just like that story they talk about in World War, when they killed which level of people, and someone was quiet, they killed the other one. They killed the other one, they killed the other one, until it was that person left, and there was no one to say anything. Human rights work is work for all of us. I like what the canon said. This report for me, as I was looking through, it didn't say anything about what about the public that takes the law into their hands? What about the public when something wrong is happening and all we can do is get a phone and TikTok about it? What about all this moral decadency whereby we have allowed so many things that are not right to thrive? This Uganda is going to be here even after we are here, but how is history going to judge us? So human rights work is collective work. All of us have rights and equal responsibilities. If we can work together, both state and non-state actors, because a good Uganda where rights are respected is good for every Ugandan. Despite your perspective, your thought, all of us are shooting to the same goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. If I had you right, the lawyers, yes, it's not about pro bono, but also don't say keep warm and well fed. Okay? Say, let me pray for your soul and let the body go.
From the report, definitely there's a lot to take back. And considering that you have mentioned that there are a number of recommendations that we need to look at, definitely I have to take back that information that we have a number of interventions that we have to do as police based on the recommendations that have been done by this report. But of course, as regards the mandate of the different state actors that enable access to justice, I think there's a need for a holistic approach towards the number of issues and interventions that have been raised by this report. As Uganda Police, we may not fully bring to book what is required in this report because we have to act with a number of people. So how do we get to the holistic approach that I'm talking about, where there's need for law reforms so that we are able to feed into each other and so that we feed into each other and be able to reach our common goal. That should be done. But I think that's also among maybe the recommendations that need to be done. And then as regards to the number of issues that have been raised in regard to the policing role, especially regarding how we are bringing out the information and the statistics. I want to tell you that as police, we have a policy definitely on how to put out our information. And that information that normally given to the public, we normally do Monday briefings regarding what the police is doing. And then we also have recently published the 2024 annual crime report. It's also very informative regarding what we have done as police. Then when it comes to the different cases of disappearances, unfortunately, I cannot make a general comment on what has been done. You have to bring out a specific case, for example, the parties, and then that's when I can be able to relay information regarding what actions we have taken as the Uganda Police. For instance, if I may bring the Kawempe issues into context, I cannot ably say that we have done this, but what I can ably bring out is that teams have been constituted already that are conducting investigations. Now, I cannot come out and say this team has done this, has done it. No, I have to wait for the report of the investigation, and that is the basis on which the Uganda Police will take action. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think it's a little more assuring that, something is happening in the background. Yes. Whether what is happening comes to the public, to the utmost conviction that, it has been done, but not seemingly done, that's another thing. Charity, finally.
So 3 things, like Perry, come to my mind, but I like what my sister here from the police concluded with. Kahindo Tafire after the incidents of Kawempe, came out and said the perpetrators were goons. And it's all over the media. He said they are goons. For us, we don't care whether they are goons or no goons. They must be brought to book. I re-emphasize what Perry has said. Perpetrators must be brought to book. Whether you were wearing masks, you had whatever it is, we want to know who is it that broke the journalists' backs. People are lying in hospital fighting for breath. And the Ugandans have spoken about it. So back to Afrobarometer and what I think we need to do about the data. Number one, the data told us that there are some people who feel they are above the law. They are more important than others. Article 21 of the Constitution says we are all equal before and under the law. We need to reflect a bit more carefully about Article 21 as regards the data that Afrobarometer brings across. Then the second thing was the issue of justice being delayed. Justice delayed is justice denied. And we saw Segrinya dying before he was given justice. We actually saw courts turn down that case, send it out of court, because he was dead. Every time justice is denied, and Article 126.2e was put in the Constitution to ensure that justice is not delayed and therefore not denied. We need to reflect on those two articles to dispense justice as per Afrobarometer.
Thank you very much, Charity. I understand that Robert is back online. Robert, your parting shots, closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor. I will appreciate everyone that has commended the role that the media plays in the democracy. I will specifically talk about my colleague's issue, Mr. Namakajo from FHRI, where he observed the fact that most media houses had to evacuate their journalists from the Kawempe North by-election, and was wondering what would happen to 2026. We did that for safety purposes, and then re-strategizing. We are on the drawing board trying to see and factor out the position of the journalists in an election. We do not want editors and media houses that send their own to die because of an election. So we are talking around with those that are concerned. We haven't gotten very positive responses from a lot of them, especially the security forces, but we hope and pray that that will happen. But we also want to make a call to the elections body, the EC, to make sure that they do not seem to treat issues as normal when journalists are really attacked. Elections and campaigns go on normally, and that for me is an act of insensitivity. One would say an act of betrayal. Going forward, we really want to thank the Afrobarometer so much for bringing statistics and data to the discussions. That indeed is a very protracted engagement, and we want to invite you to do more, especially in the areas of elections, this being an election year. Thank you so much, Doctor, and thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, Robert, for those remarks. When I was still practicing as a journalist, one of the things I was told is that there is no story worth your life. And that's one thing I learned, however good it may be. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our engagement. I want to thank you all for taking time to come and participate in this dissemination exercise. Firstly, to thank Afrobarometer for the study. It's a very, very rich study. To our panelists, thank you very much for your insightful views. I want to believe that your views, informed by your experiences, have added a block onto the discussion of human rights and access to justice in Uganda. To you all, as you go back home, may the Lord bless you abundantly.
Now, before you leave, in that corner at the entrance, there's a table where there is a small token for transport, and as well as I think for some people you will get a coupon as well for lunch. Thank you very much.